Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Resilient Show. We got a super exciting episode ahead of us. We got Joel Salatin from Polyface Farm in Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. We're going to talk about food, our food supply, regenerative farming, what actually regenerative farming is. And Time Magazine said this, that he is America's farmer, probably the most important farmer in our country right now. So it's a huge honor to have you here. I have so many questions, and I'm excited for our audience to learn about you and all the information you have to share on this topic. So
great, Chad. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. So let's get into it, huh?
Yeah. So for those in our audience that may not know you, you've been called everything from the leader of regenerative farming to Lunatic Farmer. Yeah. Lunatic Farmer is actually something you self-proclaim, so it's not an insult. It's a good thing.
No, that's right.
But just an overview of who you are and actually what you do at Polyface Farm.
Sure. So our family, my parents came to the Shenandoah Valley in 1961, bought this, eroded, gullied rock pile with the dream of farming. And Dad, I remember as a little kid, I was 4, and as a little child, I remember him bringing in experts to get, how do I make a living on a small farm, And everybody's advice, both public and private, were plant corn, buy chemical fertilizers, build silos, borrow more money, graze the forest, all this stuff. And my grandfather, his dad, had been an early charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine in 1945, 46, when it first came out, and was the first really big public pushback of the chemical agricultural approach that was developing right there post-World War II. Mom she was a school teacher, so she worked off the farm. Dad worked in town. Every penny was scraped together to pay the mortgage. That took about, 10 or 12 years to pay the farm off. But what ensued during the 60s was a wonderful time of experimentation. It was basically a glorified homestead. Forts in the woods, dams in the creek, and gardening, and milked cows and raised our food, and started experimenting with things. And Dad was very much a visionary. I'm at the age now where the older I get, the smarter Dad was, Yeah. And so he was quite a visionary and got hooked on mobile infrastructure very early, and just animal movement. In nature, animals move. They don't stay in one place. They migrate, they move. And so taking that biology, that pattern as a template, he started, moving cows using electric fence, developed a portable shade mobile for shelter. We started building ponds for additional water. We'd pump out of them with an old wobble pump they used to use for threshing machines, for steam engines and stuff. And gradually began developing these composting, carbon economy, direct marketing, sold at a curb market thing. And so then when I came back, September 24th, so now, I'm coming up through high school, and I want to be on the farm full time. And I'm now searching, how do I make a living on this little farm? It was about 100 acres open and 450 in wood. So we had a lot of forest. This is Appalachian, right. Oak trees. This is walnut, cherry, poplar, wonderful hardwoods. Had a lot of wildlife, but this 100 acres of open. And I got my first chickens when I was 10 years old, began selling people at church, in the community. I'd put them on my bicycle and I'd pedal them around the block, to neighbors and stuff, and just loved the farm. And how am I going to get back? How am I going to get back? So Teresa and I got married and made an apartment. I'm sure it was illegal, in the attic of the old farmhouse. Our house was built in 1790, so it's an old American chestnut log cabin. Built an apartment in the attic. We called it our penthouse. It's all in how you the name you call it. And we basically, we had all of our own food. I drove a $50 car. If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We had firewood for heat in the winter, and we just basically hunkered down. And even though neither one of us had high-paying jobs, we were able to save half of our salaries. So in 2 years, we were able to save enough that we had enough of a nest egg that we could live for 1 year on the farm with just live for 1 year. And so September 24, 1982, I was an investigative reporter at the local newspaper, daily newspaper, and walked out of that office. Everybody thought I was crazy. Everybody thought I was crazy. Friends, everybody thought I was crazy. But that little nest egg, we lived on $300 a month. We didn't go anywhere. We just lived from the land. We, wore thrift store clothes. That little widow's cruse of oil, if you will, extended. And it took about 3 years to finally, to exhale. We're going to make it.
We're going to be okay.
Going to be okay. 3 years. And now it's just steadily gone up to where, we do beef, pork, chicken, turkey, rabbit, duck, lamb, all, moved daily in a wonderful choreography of symbiosis and synergism, very much like the diversity of nature, where birds follow herbivores, the wildebeest, the Cape buffalo in Botswana, the birds perch on the hippos, that sort of thing. So we follow the cows with eggmobiles, with chickens. We build compost with pigs. Pigs have a plow on the end of their nose, so why use a $30,000 compost turner when you can turn it with a pig and aerate it? We call them pig aerators, aeration, pig aerators. and so letting animals do the work, and all grass-based, pasture-based, no chemicals, no vaccines, all genetically modified organism-free feeds, locally grown, and direct marketed, and it's an exciting time.
It sounds like you just explained how God intended it to work.
Well, that's our belief. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, when people ask me, what really floats your boat? What really floats my boat is the honor and privilege to be the hands and feet caressing God's creation. We view creation as an object lesson of spiritual truth. So we want people to come and visit the farm and leave, and as they're driving out the driveway, we want them to say, oh, that's what forgiveness looks like. Oh, that's what abundance looks like. Oh, that's what mercy looks like. And glory, we do believe that that you can eat happiness and you can eat stress. And the way animals are handled, they can either be happy or stressful. In fact, all of our meat cooks in about 15 to 20% faster than industrial counterparts, pork, beef, chicken, whatever. And the only thing we've been able to determine why it cooks so fast is because they never secrete adrenaline through their life. In a Tyson chicken house or a feedlot, it's a stressful existence. Stressful immunologically with all the fecal particulate. It's stressful socially with crammed up with all those animals all the time. I mean, if you had 100 people living in your house all the time, you'd be stressed, okay? Well, what happens when you get stressed? You secrete adrenaline. That's how a 100-pound mom can pick a car up off her toddler, if it falls off the jack. In a stressful situation, a military firefight, whatever, your muscles get taut, right? You're okay. And so in our situation, where each animal is allowed to have a habitat and a living environment that allows it to express its full physiological distinctiveness, its glory, if you will, its specialness, there is no stress, and so they're not secreting adrenaline. And so I believe, and I don't want to get all weird and mystical, but I believe that happiness is absolutely physically expressed. And of course, now we're seeing, medically the relationship between stress and, disease and all that. We understand there's a tremendous relation between what you're thinking and what your body's doing.
We have already, and we're probably going to continue using the word regenerative farming throughout the episode. So can you define?
So regenerative farming is simply the latest buzzword in ecological farming sense. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was called natural farming. Then it became sustainable farming. Now it's regenerative. So, there's these buzzwords, but essentially it means leaving more air, more soil, more water, more than was there when we started. That's kind of the way I look at it. The other way I look at it is the ultimate regenerative is, what do the kids want to do? Mm-hmm. And if we don't have an agriculture that attracts the next generation, we've got problems. And right now, the average American farmer is 60 years old. So there is and if you look at business, any economic sector in which the average practitioner is over 35 is an economic sector that's in decline.
That industry's dying.
That industry's dying. Yeah, the buggy whip operate, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a classic. In farming, it's now 60. So we're 25 years over, viable flourishing. And so where are we headed? And this is certainly an elephant in the room. In the next 15 years, not 50, 15 years, half of all America's agriculture equity, that's land, buildings, machinery, half of all America's agriculture equity is going to change hands in the next 15 years. That's never happened in any culture in peace. It's only happened in conquest. Now, I'm not saying we're getting ready to be conquest. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't.
Right.
But I'm just saying historically, there's never been an agrarian change of ownership that aggressive except in military conquest.
Do you think that's happened organically, or do you think there's some intent behind that?
Boy, this gets into a really tough discussion. So one of the words that I won't use is conspiracy.
Sure.
Because as soon as you use conspiracy, you're branded. You're branded as a whatever.
Right.
So what I find more beneficial in a discussion like this is to assume good intent by most. Now, maybe not at the top.
Sure.
Okay. But for most people, good intent that is misdirected, that's just wrong. And we can, we have the phrase, hell is paved with good intentions, right? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say that there is an intended part of this. I think farmers generally have been duped by their own, negligence to sleuth it out. All right.
Right.
All the way to, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life that I've got a bigger chicken house than you do. I've got, a bigger corn plant than you do. I mean, there is that element as well.
Bigger comes with compromises.
Bigger comes with compromises. And if you go to Africa, you look at a herd of zebras, for example, there is not 20 pounds difference between the biggest mare and the smallest mare. There's not 20 pounds difference. I mean, they're like clones, cookie cutters. Well, why? Well, because if the mare's too big, she's got too big a boiler to handle the stress of the drought. So she's going to die because she's got too big a body to carry around. Okay. If she's too small, she can't fight off predators. And so then she dies. So there are reasons why things are the size that they are. I mean, there's a reason why an elephant is the size an elephant is, and a mouse is the size that a mouse is. A mouse the size of an elephant wouldn't be a very successful mouse, and an elephant the size of a mouse wouldn't be a very successful elephant. In agriculture, what we've done is we have not put any moral parameters around our cleverness. And we have said, well, just because we can, should we? The movie Jurassic Park. You and I are old enough to remember the movie Jurassic Park, and remember the single statement in the movie that's the thesis of the movie is, you got these raptors. The scientist, he's figured out these raptors. They're eating cars and destroying civilization, all this mayhem. And the scientist is euphoric. Oh, look what I've done. I've brought these dinosaurs back. Oh, and the journalist gets in his face and says, but just because we can, should we?
Yeah.
That is a pregnant statement. Just because we can make a 2,000-pound cow, should we? Just because we can, with chemicals, grow 200 bushels of corn per acre, should we? Or does that then make us a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico because of chemical runoff? And now we have, toxic zone that used to grow shrimp and crabs and fish and everything, and it's completely toxic in the Gulf of Mexico. My dad used to say, we're so clever, made in the image of God, we're pretty smart, okay, that we're clever enough to overrun our own headlights. We can invent things that we can't spiritually, morally, ethically, or physically metabolize. So we invent things, and then we spend, 2 generations trying to, get out from under the invention.
Clean up the mess. I mean, with that, essentially what you're doing at Polyface is the way it was intended without all the chemicals and stuff. But now 100 years later, you think with information and knowledge, we would progress, but we actually have went backwards. Why are we going backwards? What's making us go backwards?
Because nature bats last. If you look at Genesis, Genesis chapter 1, what God brought to chaos was order. God brought order to chaos. That's the foundation of the creative act, right? And before we go any farther, let me just quickly say I'm not anti-technology at all. Okay, so we've got computer microchip electric fence energizers on our farm. We've got NASA space age polyethylene spun fiber that conducts electricity to keep the bears out of the chickens. We use technology, but we only use it in a way that enables us to enhance the natural proclivity of the animal. Okay, we don't overrun it. So a great example is for 30 years the academics and the scientists of the world told us to feed dead cows to cows. That was and they took farmers like me to free steak dinners to, hey, look at the new science. We feed dead cows to cows. 30 years later, we had bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also known as mad cow. And during those 30 years, farmers like me were looking at that saying, wait a minute, let's look around the planet. Where does an herbivore eat carrion? The elk don't, the deer don't, the wildebeest don't.
Cows don't.
Cows don't, right. And so we didn't foresee mad cow, but we said, that violates a pattern. That's chaos. That's not order. That's chaos. 30 years later, here it raised its ugly head. Nature's very forgiving. God builds a lot of forgiveness into things. You can abuse and misuse a lot. Even in a marriage, right? Until things crack. And so there's a lot of forgiveness there, but eventually you're going to reap what you sow. And if you sow chaos, you're going to get chaos. And then we had a mad cow. And so, you're old enough, you're not as old as I am, but you're old enough to remember, I'll bet, when let's have a birthday party for my 3-year-old, right? And all, the moms get invited, the kids get invited, and you have a birthday party. Well, today it takes a week of moms texting and talking to each other to determine who's got the food allergy, what we can serve, what we can't serve. I grew up, the phrase food allergy didn't even exist.
No.
We didn't hear about Campylobacter, E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella. We didn't even know grossly obese. There was one fat lady in the group, one fat man. We those kind of things. Diabetes. You knew maybe one person that had diabetes. It just didn't exist. And so I'm suggesting this new lexicon of Listeria, Campylobacter, high path avian influenza, food allergy. This is actually nature on its knees, begging, screaming back at us, saying, enough abuse, enough disrespect.
The lifestyle I live is pretty much, I do a carnivore diet. I eat primarily meat with some berries. I don't typically do vegetables at all. But all of my meats I source is I kill or catch. And when I do eat beef, it's from a farm. Right. Not like this one. I think we put this picture up and you don't approve. But from a farm like yours. I want to make sure it's, it had a good lifestyle. It ate correctly. And so I'm very particular what I put in my body. And at 49 years old, I feel extremely healthy compared to people who are like equal to my age. My dairy is from a local farm here, unpasteurized, right from the milking cows and milking goats. And I have a daughter.
You drink raw milk?
I do drink raw milk.
Oh boy! So, you're on borrowed time. You're on borrowed time.
I do straight out. And my daughter, who's she's 21 months now, and she's never had pasteurized. Milk. She's only had raw milk.
That's right.
That's right. So we are on borrowed time.
Yeah. No, you're in good shape. I mean, I grew up, we always milked a couple Guernsey cows. I grew up on raw milk. So you're 49, I'm 67, and I know I don't look it, but
because you drink raw milk.
yeah, raw milk. But I've never drunk a cup of coffee in my life. Never drunk a cup of coffee, but man, have I drunk raw milk. I've drunk semi-tractor trailer loads full of raw milk.
For me, like people, like as I talk to people about this, they think it's they're really battling with the convenience of it, right? Like it's they look at my lifestyle and going hunting, harvesting my food, taking time to find good quality beef instead of going to the grocery store. We go to farmers market once a week and get raw milk. And the eggs that we get are right off of a farm. Like people think it's an inconvenience, but it doesn't feel that inconvenient to me. So what's the hang up there? Like why do people are people so stuck in?
Well, I think that we have bred a culture that does not have a food culture. We don't have a food culture in our culture. I mean, compared to France or Spain or Scotland, I travel the world, and every time I go overseas, I always, whether I'm in Africa, South America, wherever, I ask the people there, what is the first thing that you think of when you think American food? I mean, just to see what, because you can learn a lot sometimes from people that aren't in your situation. A person that's outside looking in, a lot of times they're more perceptive than those of us that are actually, in the situation.
Yeah.
And I have never had anybody say anything except McDonald's. And so here we are. We live in a convenience food culture that we have not, as a culture, we have not built up Iberico pork or soufflés from Paris. Okay, we just don't have a food culture, and part of that is because of our pioneer spirit. Where, interestingly, here in America, when you are invited to somebody's house for dinner, the question that the hostess always asks, it's always a hostess, asks, did you get enough? Right? In Europe, they never ask, did you get enough? It's, how did you like it? That's a real different, paradigm. And so we view, as a culture, we view food as essentially a pit stop between all the other important things in life, rather than food as something to commune over, to fellowship over, to
enjoy,
to enjoy, to where we actually have a subconscious idea. This is fuel for my microbiome. I've got, several trillion microbes down here, and my mouth is all that they know about the outside world. And is that outside world coming in? Is it coming in from a completely, life disrespected, stressful, chemicalized situation? Or is what they know about the world, that world is about respect and happiness and honor and, those kinds of things. And of course, that's where your hunting and your wildlife, those animals are living in a habitat that enables them to function until they caught your hook, or until a predator gets them, whether that predator is two-legged or four-legged. Very seldom do animals in nature die of old age.
Sure.
They die with their boots on, right? Or their hooves on, or their, they die as they're doing their thing. And the convenience is a horrible thing. Does it seem easy? Well, a provenance, a skill to acquire provenance, like you're acquiring provenance, is a skill just like any other skill. First thing you got to do is say, this is important to me. That's the first thing. Is this important? And the second thing is then to just start, and it gets easier and easier.
Yeah.
Who does the cooking at your house?
Usually me.
Usually you. All right. Well, I don't do the cooking at my house, but I can tell you it's so fun when you get invited to somebody's house, and it just looks like everything just appears on the table, and this house, they know how to cook.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to single service packaged stuff. So the point is that we can never have a an authentic food system and be this profoundly disconnected from it from a participatory, visceral way. And I'm not talking about going back to great grandma's, going to the spring with a wooden bucket to get water and getting up at 4 to put wood in the wood cook stove so you got you can fry eggs when Pa comes in from milking the cow. Our kitchens have never been so sophisticatedly techno-gadgetized as they are today. We got Instapot, we got crock pots, we got ice cream makers, bread makers, hot and cold water on demand, refrigerators. I mean, we got the coolest, techniques in the world. And so cooking from scratch and using our kitchens to prepare, preserve, package, and process foods has never been easier. And so we should be, there's no reason to have a packaged single service microwavable frozen stuff. Never. Ultra processed. There's no reason for it. There should not even be a breakfast food aisle in the supermarket. In fact, you shouldn't even go to the supermarket except for maybe toilet paper and tissue paper or something like that, a few staples. But generally, we're about trying to disentangle from that system, because the more we know about how industrial corporate food systems manipulate food. I mean, think about this. For 50 years, let's take tomatoes. What have tomatoes been selected for? The tomatoes that are in the supermarket, what have they been selected for 50, 60 years? They've not been selected for nutrition. They've not been selected for taste. They've been selected for shippability. Can you rattle around in the back of a tractor trailer, from California to Vermont, and not be mush? Well, when you select cultivars based on shippability or transportability, you're looking for cardboard. So why do kids, and I realize you don't eat vegetables. That's a bad example here. Normally people like to eat a tomato. I love tomatoes. Okay. And a good juicy sliced tomato, man,
I'm not against it. If I go overseas, tasting a tomato overseas, I could sit.
In Spain, yeah.
I was in Tajikistan, and the soil in Tajikistan is really good.
Oh yeah,
and I sat down, and they served a plate of a tomato. Like everybody got a tomato and an onion. I don't like onions either, and I just sat there and ate it. It was just so good.
Oh yeah. And the difference between a backyard grown, juicy tomato that drips down your arm versus the cardboard variety that's in the store is completely different in taste, texture, nutritional quality, all those things. And so, yes, you can do this, you can do this, and it's not that difficult. And now with distribution where it is, we can distribute our farm now, ships nationwide. So if somebody's, wanting, well, what does a grass finished beef taste like? I've never had one. What does a pastured chicken taste like? Shameless plug. You can get it we'll ship it to you.
Yeah.
Until you find your local supplier. And if you don't find your local supplier, that's fine. But we lots of times, one of our favorite, little feedback things is, I didn't know where to get stuff like yours. And so I heard about you, I got it. And I've been 3 or 4 months, sleuthing in my local area, and I found somebody like you. So I'm going to quit buying from you, not because I'm unhappy, but because I found
a local.
And, nothing warms our heart more. We want that. And if we had that kind of system in the spring of 2020, we would not have had the kind of glitch we did where all the, the supermarket shelves went bare.
Right. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. Because you need a lot more funnels coming in instead of being serviced by, 3,000 mega processing centers. If instead we'd been serviced by 300,000 neighborhood, smaller community-based processing centers, canneries and butcher, slaughterhouses, things like that, we would not have had the glitch that we had in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, COVID, the supply chain issues for COVID really shined a light on how fragile our system is, and the local farmers actually I'm sure you like experienced a spike in sales. Because
We sold 6 months worth of stuff in 6 weeks. It was unbelievable. But we were able to adjust with it. Like our little slaughterhouse, we never shut down. We never had any problem. We just went forward. And as a military tactician, when you're in a disturbance, disruptive times, you don't want to be in an aircraft carrier. You want to be in a speedboat. It's not the big that eat the small. It's the fast that eat the slow. And you want to be in a speedboat. If you're in a rocky shoals area, you don't want to be in an aircraft carrier. You want to be nimble, all right, nimble and be able to move around and shift. And so the shorter your food chain, the fewer warehouses and transport hubs and seaports and all that, the fewer of those there are between your plate and the field that grew it, the less fragile it is.
That's it, more reliable. Like a lot of our audience are really interested in some of the topics talk about with prepping. I'm really good friends with a guy named Mike Glover. He's one of my best friends in the world. He runs a company called Fieldcraft Survival. He wrote a book called Prepped that I helped endorse and get out there because I really believe that at any moment, just from my experience around the world, at any moment, America and our culture could be in a survival scenario. I mean, a great blackout, a war, a natural disaster. I mean, we're seeing it right now. And in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, like even if it's not on a national scale, it could be on a local scale. People should have the means and ability to provide for themselves. And the more you rely on the supply chain, the more vulnerable you are. I believe every man should be able to harvest food. You should be able to hunt, fish, provide potable water for your family, and you should know how to do those things. And if you have a local farm that you're connected with, and I'm not waiting till emergency happens, then you're more prepared, you're more resourced for those kind of events.
And stockpile some things.
Sure.
I had a fascinating visitor last year. It was in the fall of 2023. He came to one of our last farm tours of the year. He was a career spook up in very, very high in 30-year career guy, top spook in DC. I don't know exactly which agency, but it was something like, American Defense Agency or something. It was the agency that's the spook over the spooks.
Yeah.
Okay. And he said that they had been studying civilizational collapse. Mm-hmm. And it was a fascinating conversation because so many times preppers are, well, you got to have 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, you got all this way out there. And just as a side note, in the last 5 years, I've been contacted by about 5 billionaires, not millionaires, billionaires who've contacted me and asked, I think the wheels are going to fall off. Can you help me get to find a safe place? I call it an agrarian bunker. That's what they're looking for, an agrarian bunker. Okay. And I had one of them ask me, he said, what does wheels falling off mean to you? What does that mean? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't really, just formalized that. So I said, give me a week and I'll talk to my team and we'll decide what wheels falling off means. And what we came up with was, you can make a long list, but
sure.
our short list was no fuel, no power, and no grain. If you can't get grain, fuel, or electricity, you're in trouble. Well, so this guy came, 30-year career spook. He said, we've been studying civilizational collapse. And he said, we've come to an interesting conclusion. His division, his, his bean counters, his strategists. All right. He said, we found an interesting thing. There's a magic number. It's 90 days. 90 days from a catastrophe is how long it takes for human cleverness, adaptation, adjustment to start filling the gaps left from a catastrophe. And so as I've traveled the world, I have met the most fascinating people because, remember, I'm on the lunatic fringe, okay? And so I'm meeting people who, for example, have figured out how to put wood in a chamber and run a generator, for example, a combustion engine.
Right.
They've figured out how to put a magnifying glass on a ceramic pile and superheat it to make steam to run a little turbine. micro hydro. I mean, I was at a place in Australia. It was a bakery, and they were running a whole thing on a micro hydro turbine that was about the size of a basketball, and they had a stream that they had channeled out and just diverted this water down, and it was just running through this little micro hydro basketball site. It was fascinating, and they were running their whole. They had a public thing, had lights, all this stuff. Where I'm going is that this guy, I just found it fascinating. He said in all their bean counting, 90 days is how quickly people who are left, okay, figure out alternative currencies, alternative energies, how to make things, makeshift things, make do, and learn new skills. How to butcher a deer, how to tan leather, whatever. And so I found that very encouraging.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between 90 days and 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. As far as being ready for something. And so, in the spring of 2020, everybody's freaking out. Teresa just keeps sending me to the basement with my list, bring up a can of green beans, 2 quarts of tomato juice, and I'm shopping in the basement. And you can can meat, you can can meat. So if the power goes out, and if it's canned, it's already cooked. You can eat it cold if you have to. But that minimal thought process, you should have a cistern at your house. If you don't have a well, you should have a cistern. You should be able to get to water, because you can go a while without food, but if you don't have water, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so if you're in an urban sector, you should bury a couple cisterns, get an IBC tote, and bury it in the ground and have 250 gallons of water. And you're not going to be using it for flushing. You're going to do that in the backyard behind a tree, and you're going to be drinking water. These are really basic, foundational things that anyone who's feeling like a protector, should do.
Is that me? I promise I had better than Salat.
You are fired.
I love it. I'm gonna take my drink right now. I assume we're not recording for a moment.
Yeah.
This will be edited out.
Hey guys, 10 years ago, I had found myself in a position to where investing in Mighty Oaks and all the different things I'm involved in, I had found myself not prepared for retirement. And I went to my friend Ryan Wheelis at Allied Wealth. He had been a longtime supporter of Mighty Oaks Foundation. From the beginning, he's one of our first donors to Mighty Oaks, has been a friend for a long time, and I really trusted him. And he has helped me build my retirement and invest in my future through his company, Allied Wealth. He's one of the smartest guys I know when it comes to wealth management, and has taken money that I had stuck away in 401ks that was not really producing and made it produced tenfold. And I'm so happy with the results for me that I asked him to partner with this show, and he is a partner of this show now. And we want to not only let you guys know about Allied Wealth, but we're going to be doing some special episodes on wealth management with Ryan helping co-host them. I say co-host. I'm going to be asking him questions, and we're going to be providing you information on how to best manage your wealth. So if you're like me and you need someone to help you with your retirement, with your investments, with just your overall wealth management, go to alliedwealth.com and meet Ryan and his team to get you set up. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, I believe, as you used to mention the word protector, as a man, like if your solution to providing water, which you have about 3 days to live without water, like your solution for that is going to the faucet, you're unprepared. If your solution to providing food is going to the grocery store, if you don't have an alternative solution besides going to the grocery store, you're in trouble. And so I believe, on the prepping side, like man protectors, should have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and that's not out of fear. That's not out of fear.
It's responsibility.
It's out of responsibility, and even I would say faith that the abundance is there. We just have to take it.
You got to know how to get to it.
You got to leverage it. Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned several times, and I really appreciate this because I wasn't even thinking this before the show, the humane aspects of farming and harvesting meat. One of the things I hear on the opposite side, and I'm around a lot of people who are vegans because of a sport that I do. There's a lot of vegans in a sport that I do in jiu-jitsu. one of the things I've always heard about it is the humane side of being vegan or
Haven't we gotten beyond killing animals?
right, right. So, but it's quite the opposite, right? When you're talking about producing mass amounts of fruits and vegetables to supply at a disproportionate rate of that we're supposed to be consuming, isn't that more impactful on animals and the environment?
Well, absolutely. Especially when you start looking at how differently animals can be produced.
Right.
So I think it's important to understand, let's just get it out of the way right now, that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. That is a fact. 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. Now, it wasn't all eaten by people. We had a couple 100 million bison. We had 2 million wolves that needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's a lot of meat. We had 200 million beavers that ate more vegetables. They're herbivores. They ate more vegetables. I mean, I realize vegetables was in the form of bark and sap and things like that, but they ate more vegetation than all the humans in North America today. We had flocks of passenger pigeons. Audubon, the great naturalist, John Audubon, recorded in his diary up in Massachusetts, he said, "I sat under a tree and I couldn't see the sun for 3 days because of the flock of passenger pigeons that flew over was so big and so dense it blocked out the sun for 3 days." Now, who in the world in America has seen a flock of birds block out the sun even for 3 hours, let alone for 3? And this is before Purdue, Cargill, Pilgrim's Pride, factory housing, anything. And Native American legends have stories about, for example, these birds that would come in such massive flocks and land in the trees and literally break the branches off the trees. You wake up in the morning and it sounds like a war with branches breaking. You wake up in the morning, you look out and there's a whole area, 5 or 6 acres that's got an inch of bird poo, and the trees are just spires sticking up where they've been broken off. I mean, this is stuff that I think that we tend to think, well, boy, I'm sure glad John Deere saved us. Well, I'm sure glad Monsanto saved us. No. We actually were far more abundant prior to modern times. Our question is always, well, if it was so abundant back then, how do we recreate that? The whole ecological argument is fallacious against animals because we know there were so many more. The animal weight of North America was more 500 years ago than it is today, even if you put all the humans in it. Okay. Now the problem is that the way animals are raised stimulate a backlash.
Sure.
When you've got 15,000 chickens crammed in a confinement animal feeding a factory farm, and you have to wear a gas mask and walk through sheep dip to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it, and these animals are, especially the poultry, turkeys and chickens, there's a fecal pall. They're not potty trained. They don't wear diapers. They're not going to the toilet. They're living in their toilet. Okay. The dust is coming up, and the dust is like sandpaper into their respiratory tracts, which, sandpapers their mucous membranes, which makes abrasions in their mucous membranes and creates a direct conduit between the fecal pall, the fecal air particulate, straight into the bloodstream. And this is where we get contamination and things. The biological toxin barrier that's supposed to function and work, with cilia and protective membranes, gets overridden, by this pathogenic, this toxic environment. When you see that, and if you have a heart, if you care, if you have a heart, this is not good.
That's inhumane.
It's inhumane. I mean, pigs that are such social creatures, to see them, confined in little cubicles of, 100 hogs per, half the size of this room, this studio. Pigs are omnivores, and so they cut off their tails so that the tail is real tender, and that way, when a neighbor pig, because they're stressed, attacks or bites on the tail, a pig immediately moves away because it hurts more than if the tail were entire, and that protects the pigs from cannibalism. In a happy setting, pigs don't cannibalize each other. They lie down together and they make a nest and they're actually collaborative. They're not trying to kill each other. And so, you see this kind of thing. If you have a heart at all, you say, this is not right. And so it's easy for that to drive your mentality, because of the human interaction with the animal is so bad that we should never interact with the animal. We just eliminate livestock agriculture. Okay.
Right.
I mean, that's a natural, corrective action from a pendulum swing. But nutritionally, there are a ton of things like B12 that our bodies can't make, nuts can't make, fruits can't make, nothing can make, that are really important to us. And if you look back through history, every civilization, the foundation of all the ancient civilizations, was animal-based, either milk, meat, or seafood, because those are the only nutrient-dense foods. A tomato is not nutrient-dense. A watermelon is not nutrient-dense. Now, I love tomatoes and I love watermelons, but I don't eat those primarily for their nutrition. Okay, I eat those for phytochemicals and things like that, and because my taste buds like them. Yeah, I like them. Right, but in ancient cultures, all ancient cultures, their foundation was animal-based, because that's the only thing that could be produced without tillage. So the cheap grain phenomenon, which has just really occurred only since mechanization and cheap energy, for all human history, if you wanted to grow wheat or barley or corn, maize in the Americas, you had to go out and with a sharp stick or maybe a bison clavicle hoe, sinew tied to a stick. All right. You had to physically break sod, break grass, break, a ground cover so that you could put in an annual, so that you could plant an annual seed as opposed to a perennial. You had to break the perennial sod and plant your annual. Well, that's a lot of effort. Okay. And as draft power came along, oxen and things, walking behind them with a sharp stick all day to till, to break the sod so you could break the perennial and put in an annual, that was a very laborious, difficult thing. And so the ancients, the basis of their nutrition was animal-based, especially herbivores, because herbivores could eat perennials. They could convert the cellulose of a grass plant that you and I we can't metabolize it. I mean, we could eat 5 pounds of grass a day and we'd die. I mean, we can't, our bodies can't, as monogastrics, we can't metabolize that. But herbivores and ungulates, the multi-stomached animals, can ferment all that material and convert that cellulitic structure into nutrition and into meat and milk without tillage. Same with seafood. And so the non-animal diet is completely aberrant from human history, completely aberrant. That's important to realize. I mean, if you go that direction, you're not going into some new Star Trek nirvana where we finally get to disconnect our ecological umbilical, and sail off into a Star Trek future. No, it's actually an incredibly ignorant position of our dependency on our ecological umbilical and where it's been for a long time. And finally, let me just mention the whole, sentient being thing. Yeah, I debated Peter Singer on, animals should not be on your plate. it's fascinating to me that our ancestors didn't have time for this debate.
No.
If you could shoot it, trap it, catch it, you lived another day. I mean, the fact that we can even sit around here today and talk about whether or not you should eat animals is indicative of our own luxuriant, aberrant disconnection to a non-participatory, non-visceral interaction with our foundation. And as far as sentience is concerned, what we're now discovering, I mean, this is happening literally daily now. We're finding new communication patterns among fungi, molds, plants. I mean, Stanford has now found, they call it the language of the microbes in our microbiome, our gut. They're actually trading. I've got some polysaccharide for that molybdenum over there. You got some boron? I'll trade you a little bit of calcium for your selenium. And I always liken this, and this is going on in the soil too. The soil of microbes are actually out at the rhizosphere, which is out at the edge of the root structure, where the plant interacts with the soil, is like an underground commercial cafe. I liken it to Star Wars when Luke Skywalker, he's looking for a transport, right? He walks into that space cafe and meets Han Solo. Over in the corner, there's this band playing, right? Remember?
Right.
And there's all these aliens, two-headed things, and whoop, whoop, and all this stuff. And that's the way I view what's going on in our microbiome and the soil between all these microbes. They're sloshing through. It's like a swamp creatures, and they're sloshing through this wet, juicy space. One comes along and whacks off the head of one microbe and eats it up, and one has a spear and he pierces one of these aqueous microbes and sucks out the stuff, and all this is happening inside us in the soil. It's all, and they're all thinking, they're all surviving or conquering or trading or all this stuff. We even know now, like in Africa, they always wondered, why do the giraffes always graze into the wind? They never go downwind when they're grazing the acacia trees. Why do they graze upwind? Well, now we know that when a leaf gets eaten by a giraffe, it emits a pheromone that goes to the neighboring leaves and changes their phytochemical properties and makes them bitter. So it's a defense mechanism of the tree to make their leaves unpalatable to the giraffes. Well, the giraffes know this, so the giraffes graze upwind, trying to beat the pheromones that embitter the leaves as they head upwind. If that's not sentience, I don't know what is. Maple trees. You ever tap a maple tree? Maple trees, so the sap's running in the spring, and so the sap is like the tree's blood supply. And so a heavy wind comes up. The tree stops giving sap. I mean, it just cuts it off like a valve, because the tree is thinking, oh, if I lose a branch in the wind, I need to be able to send all my sap to the wound. When the wind stops, tree says, okay, everything, coast is clear, and starts releasing sap again. If that's not sentience, I don't know what is. We now realize the truth is that the entire cosmos is pulsing with sentience. This is not some inert, inanimate thing. And if you don't believe there's sentience going on, go lie naked in your flower bed for 3 days and see what gets eaten. Everything is eating and being eaten. Probably one of the best examples is a compost pile. I mean, what vegan doesn't want a compost pile? But that whole compost pile is predicated on everything being eaten and digested. The life, death, decomposition, regeneration, life, death, decomposition, regeneration, that cycle is foundational to life. And so there's not a moral, physical, ecological, or nutritional justification for a non-animal consumption. It simply doesn't exist. It's an overreaction to the abuse, disrespect, and inhumanity that's been exploited on Western modern livestock agriculture that has stimulated this this
Yeah.
kind of thinking. And also, the only interaction with animals is your pet dog or pet cat. I mean, we now have this thing that your cat is my uncle, is my, dog, and we have this equivalency now. The animals are equivalent to humans and all that stuff. Listen, animals are not human. Listen, if a chicken happens to die in my chicken yard, they don't go have a funeral for the chicken. The other chickens all come over and eat it. Okay. I mean, I'm up there in the hoop house in the wintertime. In the hoop house, we put, pigs in the hoop house with chickens and everything. And, you've got a group of pigs in there, and pigs, nothing sleeps on a farm like a pig. I mean, if you want to see like the epitome of napping, look at a group of pigs. I mean, they just they're comatose. They just, and they all lie together like cordwood, and they all want to touch each other and lie, they just sleep. So the pigs are lying there sleeping. It's the afternoon, and the chickens, they're walk, walk, they're going around. Chicken walks up to one of these pigs, steps up on the pig, and and is poking around, getting something, bit of grain or bug or whatever off the pig. All of a sudden, the pig, reaches around, grabs the chicken, and then all the other pigs wake up, jump up, and one of them pulls a wing off, one pulls a leg off. Then you got, 10 feet of intestines strewn over. And in 5 minutes, this group of pigs has consumed this chicken. And they all immediately go back to napping, and they're done. It doesn't take much. Pigs, they're omnivores, but they don't eat very much of this. It's almost like a candy bar, like a little treat.
Snack.
Yeah, snack.
Chicken
Right,
snack.
right. Like a little snack stick, a little like a protein net snack stick. All right.
Like a chicken wing. Literally.
Yeah. Okay. So the pigs go back to sleeping tomorrow. So everything's fine. Harmony for the rest of the day. Tomorrow, 2:00 in the afternoon, the pigs are napping. Here comes the chicken. Now that chicken was right there and saw all this happen yesterday. Chicken comes up, steps on pig. They get another chicken. So they eat about one. A group of 50 pigs will eat maybe one chicken a day. I mean, that's about all they really want. But the point is, no human, if you were a chicken, seeing that happen, would step up on a pig tomorrow. No human would do that. And so as far as bullying, one of the most important distinctions between humans and animals is the capacity to offer charity to the disadvantaged. Mm-hmm. I have never seen a group of pigs say, that little pig over there, he's kind of struggling. When they bring the feed today, let's all of us big ones, let's all of us stay over here in the corner, and we'll let that little piggy, we'll let him go up and get all he wants, and then we'll come and eat the leftover. Never seen it happen. I mean, even cows with their calves, they'll butt their little baby calf away to get a bite of clover. Bullying is probably, and me first, is the single biggest, mental, emotional aspect of animals. And I think we show our humanity best and greatest when we reach down and help somebody else. That's when we really express our humanity.
With that, when you talk about the animals and the cruelty versus the humane ways to harvest animals, you're really looking at a couple of ways. One would be regenerative farming, either having your own farm or going through somewhere like Polyface to procure your meat. Or the other would be hunting and harvesting your own food through hunting. However, you mentioned earlier before the show, we were talking about this, hunting, at least in America, you can't get anything you harvest into the food supply. Why is that?
Well, because in our country, I mean, I don't know the etiology of this,
right,
but at least in our country right now, it is assumed that the public, the government, if you will, society owns wildlife, and from a legal standpoint, the government owns it. Endangered species, all these things, and so, like right here where we are in Texas, there's a big problem with wild pigs.
Yes.
They're all over the place.
Tearing up farms, destroying land.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big deal. Well, in Europe, where pigs have been there for a lot longer than they've been here, they don't have this problem at all. I do a lot of stuff with farmers in Europe, and they just don't. It's just not. You would think that since pigs were there, centuries before they came here, that the farmers would be constantly complaining about pig. No, nobody ever complains about. You know why? Because they allow them to be hunted and go into the supermarket. You can actually hunt wild pigs in Europe, and they're on the grocery store shelf. And if we had that same kind of incentive here, man, there'd be people that would be out hunting pigs, and they'd go into the food supply. Now, here, the only food supply it can go into is the homeless shelter. You can give it away.
Yep.
But it just can't go into the for sale food supply.
That was one of the things one of my sons did growing up is he would go hunt moose and hogs.
Right.
And he'd make money. Most of the time they would just dump the hog bodies. But sometimes they would bring them they had a place in Houston they could bring them to, and they would give them away to the homeless.
Right. But I'm not saying it's wasted to give them away to the homeless, but what a waste that so many times a lot of these carcasses are just left to rot because there's no real value. There's no inherent value.
Right.
I mean, there's an altruistic value if you're going to give it away to a homeless. There's an altruistic value, but unless you're a socialist, you realize the way that you solve problems in a society, the most efficacious way is to create some sort of an economic incentive.
Yeah.
To solve that problem, and that's exactly what they've done in Europe. In fact, I was there doing a seminar in Germany, and everybody, the farmers that came, they were all talking about the next week, the whole village was going to surround, like they were going to have 200 guys go out and surround this forested area, of a couple square miles, and actually make a circle and close it in and have a hog hunt.
Right.
And I don't know how many they were going to get, but it was a bunch, and they were just going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. I assume they knew something about not shooting each other. I mean, how, when the donut hole gets small, how do you? But if you've got 500 hogs that you've encircled and they're coming into a smaller, that would be a fun hunt to be a part of. And they took all that, and they had the trailers set up, everything's refrigerated trailers. They got them right there. And that pork is going to go right into the supermarket, and they're going to sell them. And
the fact that
wonderful
that we could give the food away in the homeless shelters and stuff like that versus selling them shows that the prohibition on hunting and distribution into the food supply is not based on safety. It's based on economic reasons.
It's certainly not based on food safety. It's based on market access. And I think sometimes and I think too, in all fairness, it's based on, we don't want to give an economic incentive to hunt a wild animal, then they'd all be hunted out. Well, in the case of wild pigs, you're never going to hunt them all out. They're never going to be hunted all out. And in Virginia right now, our deer population is exploding.
Yeah. Because
there's nobody hunting. I talked to a game commission guy not long ago. He said we could open season deer. I mean, shoot it anytime you want to, anywhere you want to, and we'd still have way too many because the old, father-son bonding thing of going hunting together. Now the kids in the basement playing video games, and if you hunt the school, the school do-gooders, shame you. Oh, you're shooting Bambi,
Yeah.
And we've Disney-fied our culture to the point where it's politically incorrect to do this. So you get a confluence of all those cultural, burdens on a hunter, and suddenly you have, in Virginia, I saw the figure not long ago. It's millions and millions of dollars of automobile insurance claims, and so the scuttlebutt is that they've actually brought in sterile wolves to Virginia to handle, because they don't want them to get out of control. So they sterilize them, then they release them to try to control the insurance companies are paying for this. This is scuttlebutt. I don't know if it's all true, but they say, well, we don't have mountain lions in Virginia. Well, no, I've seen people that have pictures of them on their phone, but the orthodoxy is we don't have mountain lions in Virginia. No, we do. The state just doesn't want to admit it. We had a fox get into our chickens a few years ago, and the state has a full-time professional trapper to handle nuisance animals around. And so I called it, and I tried to shoot the thing. I tried to trap it. I couldn't get it. He was picking my pocket. So I called the state. And I said, hey, can you send out the trapper and trap your one of your foxes? Your foxes in my chickens. And they said, oh, well, no, wait a minute. This is a 50-50 partnership here. That it's partly your fox, partly our fox. I said, oh, okay. Well, then I'll just go shoot my deer whenever I want venison. I'll just go shoot my deer. I won't shoot yours. I'll just shoot mine and leave yours alone. Well, it doesn't quite work like that either. It's a I want my cake and eat it too kind of situation.
Yeah, every year I do get invited to these management hunts. The management hunt is to make the population of deer in the area healthier.
Exactly.
And so we do these management hunts all the time. So
in our county right now, Chad, in our county, half of all the foxes have mange. Now, mange, is a kind of funky disease that comes when the population gets too high, and then a lot of them die, and then it collapses, and then they build back, collapses. And the reason we have it, and rabies, we've got way more rabies. And the reason is because the animal welfare folks shut down live, furs for clothing. And now everything's, polyester.
yeah,
And there's no market now. I mean, I know a couple of our neighbors, all of their early spending money as teens was running trap lines, muskrats and minks and stuff.
that's one of the first things I did for money as a kid was neutral rats.
Yeah, and
yeah.
there was money in it.
Yes,
because back in the 20s and 30s, people wore fur coats, and now there's no money in it at all because there's no market for it. If you happen to wear one at an airport, you'll probably be assaulted by some
they throw something on you.
person. Yeah, and so there's no market, and so nobody's involved, and so we have this proliferation. Now we have all these sick foxes running around due to an oversupply. I can say for a fact, years ago, we were getting wood chips from one of these utility rights of way crew guys, and because we do a lot of composting, so we use a tremendous amount of chips, and so we said, how can we get you to really be loyal and bring us your loads of chips, and dump them here, and well, turns out he was a sport rabbit hunter, used rabbit dogs, beagles. He says, well, yeah, we need a nice, safe place to hunt. And I said, hey, I'm your guy. Come on out and hunt rabbits. And from the year they started hunting rabbits, our rabbit population exploded. And this has been 20 years ago. And it was now I didn't do a scientific test. I'm just telling you that from that time on, we began seeing, they were in the road, in the lanes, in the fields. We began seeing twice as many rabbits as we'd ever seen before. And I think it's because they actually, they exercised the population to where they were actually more prolific than if they hadn't been exercised.
I want to go into the food pyramid. I know you said you don't want to do it you don't like the word conspiracy, but for me, the food pyramid in America is probably this is my opinion, the biggest scam in our country, and it's probably been responsible for more than millions of deaths a year when you talk about obesity, heart disease, all these things.
Absolutely.
So I just really would love to hear your thoughts on the food pyramid.
Yeah, well, it came out in 1979. And it put basically, Cheerios and Fruit Loops on the bottom and good stuff on the top. So your foundation is, breakfast cereal instead of, sausage and eggs. And of course it was based on, the big study by Ansel Keys back in the in the 50s and 60s, and erroneously linked heart disease and all sorts of things to eating fat and meat consumption. That whole study has been summarily dispossessed now and thrown out and discredited. But the tail of that, the halo of it still survives.
Remains, yeah.
I mean, and just in the last month, the USDA has come out with Fruit Loops and Cheerios are more nutritious than beef. I mean, really? And so you can actually, I've watched the overlays, like trend lines from the food pyramid. And if you overlay the trend lines of obesity, diabetes on the consumption of grains, the lines are absolutely parallel. The trajectories are identical. Now, that doesn't prove causation. I understand that. But when you have that direct a correlation on so many levels, you've got a real problem. And or at least causation would certainly be you'd be a fool not to wonder, is there
Right.
some cause here? And so, yes, it should give us all pause to realize we would probably be a much healthier nation if the government had never told us what to eat. And of course, it didn't start with the food pyramid. It started way back with margarine and Crisco. Okay, hydrogenated vegetable oil. I mean, the Germans started making canola oil to lubricate machinery, and then we started putting it in food. And this summer we had the Olympics. Who wasn't rooting for Simone Biles, the gymnast, or the American whatever team? You want to. There are things where you want to be number one in the world. We want to have the best gymnast, the best soccer team, the best basketball team, whatever. And in the Winter Olympics, the best skier, the best. I mean, that's just national pride, right?
Right.
There are other areas you don't want to be number one in the world. And we are number one. We, America, is number one in the world in chronic non-infectious morbidity. So just so everybody understands, infectious morbidity is things like typhus. They're communicable, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles. Okay. That's infectious disease. Non-infectious is known as lifestyle diseases, cancer, heart disease, diabetes. These are non-infectious. We lead the world. We're number one. We are ahead of them per capita in these non-infectious,
Including obesity.
and obesity, diseases. And there's a reason for that. We now way lead the world in autism. I mean, 40 years ago, 1 in 10,000. Today, 1 in 34, trending worse. Our nation, we cannot afford the caretaking cost when you have this many physically, mentally, or emotionally non-functioning people that need care and attention. Remember, the difference between humans and animals is
We're going to care for them.
animals eat their culls, humans take care of their culls. That's how we differ. One of the differentiating things. And as a culture, we simply cannot afford the caretaking cost of this. We just, it's a trajectory to unsustainable. You can't
sustain it.
You can't do it. Yeah, what is 77% of our 18 to 23-year-olds are unfit for military service. A nation can't defend itself when 77% of its most physically virile population can't do a pull-up. It's unprecedented, actually, in history. We are in completely guinea pig, uncharted waters heading down this direction. And so I would suggest that there's a direct relationship between the fact that we invented McDonald's, we invented margarine, we invented DDT, we invented genetically modified organisms, GMOs, we invented glyphosate, and we vaccinate. I mean, good grief, the whole vaccination thing is now, and I don't want to get off on too far of a rabbit trail, but I mean, when I was a kid, you got like 3 by the time you were 6. Today, it's like 74 by the time you're 3.
insane,
I mean, it's outrageous. And so this is, of course, what's driven Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s one of the things.
Yeah.
I, for one, I don't agree with RFK Jr. on, don't want to get too political, but unless you want to, but I, for one, am very grateful that this discussion of our nation's health has actually gotten some traction on a stage.
Yeah.
People like me, we've been crying about this, our soil erosion, I mean, toxic food, nutrient deficient food, our healthcare costs. I mean,
Poisons being put in food. Like literal poisons being put in
red
the food
dye
supply.
29. Listen, in 1940, America consumed, the entire nation in 1940 consumed 1 million pounds of monosodium glutamate, MSG. Today, we consume 300 million pounds. 300 million pounds. That's almost a pound for every person in America, with a population of whatever, 350 million. It's unbelievable. And isn't it interesting that in the last 50 years, per capita consumption of red meat in America has dropped from about 75 pounds per capita to now down to 50 pounds per capita. Well, I thought that caused heart disease. I thought that caused colon cancer. I thought that I was just in Europe.
All those diseases are going up.
All those are going way up, and our meat consumption is going way down. In Uruguay, I was just in Uruguay, South America, doing a seminar a few months ago.
Beautiful country, great beef.
Beautiful. Oh, beef. Oh, man. And their consumption of beef is over 200 pounds per capita. 200 pounds per capita.
And I'm willing to guess their heart disease is pretty low.
Very, very low. Cancer low, heart disease low. Nobody's fat. They're physically fit. Yeah. So, but of course they produce almost no grain finished beef. It's all grass finished. They can't afford grain. So they grass finish everything. Same in Argentina, Paraguay, those countries, they do that. We're the only ones that feed herbivores grain, which they're not supposed to eat, to make them grow faster and fatten them up. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
So it's funny you mentioned RFK because I was going to bring that up. And I agree with you. If RFK was running for president and it was based on policy, he would not be getting my vote. However, on this topic, if he's on a ticket as a cabinet position for the Secretary of Health,
yes,
that's an extra reason for me to vote for President Trump because I am so concerned about this issue for America, for myself. I believe that there is carcinogens and poisons being put in our food.
Yes,
this man RFK has fought big pharma. He's fought big agriculture. He is passionate about this, and he's very smart on it. And I mean, what do you see the change if he gets in, President Trump gets in, if RFK becomes Secretary of Health? What changes do you see coming? Like, what can he actually change from that position?
Well, there are numerous things that he's put forward, and let me say as a caveat for me, I've been very friendly with RFK Jr. In fact, I was asked to give a 3-minute speech yesterday for their virtual town hall. It had Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Trump, and I was on this consult job here in Texas and couldn't do it. So I'm have been very friendly with RFK Jr., have met him, and so where I am, and I'm happy to tell him this. I tell his inner sanctum this. I say, look, you got to love a guy that sued the government 150 times or whatever it is, 250 times. But where we disagree is he's always suing the government to do more, and I want to just abolish the agency. Just forget it. Just let us do our thing. But certainly, what he would do right off the top is a couple of big policy things that I appreciate. Number one, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, the old food stamp program. A lot of people don't realize 10% of SNAP money, $9 billion. So this is a $90 billion a year program, okay? It's wrapped up in the USDA budget. USDA administers SNAP. $9 billion a year from SNAP. 10% of their budget goes to sugary soft drinks. That should not be. You should not be able to take my taxes and buy Coca-Cola. Now, I don't have a vendetta against Coca-Cola. I mean, in my world, they wouldn't exist. But if it's a supplemental, nutritional, remember nutritional?
Yeah.
There's
that's
no
that's the acronym. SNAP is Supplemental Nutritional
Assistance Program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no nutrients in Coke.
There's no nutrients in a tractor trailer load of Coke. And so this results in a $9 billion direct subsidy to the high fructose corn sugary drink soda market. That shouldn't happen. And that's one of the first things I think that RFK Jr., if he got a cabinet position, he would go after that right now. Another one would be that government researchers could not personally benefit from patents on their research. Dr. Anthony Fauci personally benefits millions and millions of dollars. His name is on research, patented drugs that the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, that he was in charge of for years. The government agency should not own the patent, on stuff. And researchers should not be able to participate in the largesse.
These are conflicts of interest at the cost of the health of our, of our country.
Absolutely, sure. It's such an obvious conflict of interest. It's crazy. So so those are things that that could be done. But I don't know. I don't know what's actually doable. Mm-hmm. But I know those are two things that he's really committed to. And I would love to see, a debate, a national shakeup at that level.
I would love to see a face-to-face debate with him and the current Secretary of Health.
Oh, yeah.
I would pay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an event that would pay more money to see than that.
Yeah.
I mean, what a contrast in human beings.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll tell you, when he went over to Trump, again, I just have to say that my respect for him went way up.
Yeah.
Because
same.
His family, his friends, the Kennedy legacy, they're Democrats. I mean, it's like a zebra changing his stripes, okay?
Right.
And so the personal cost to him, even his wife, okay? The personal cost to do this, very few people are willing to put that on the line. And he did. And I honor him. I respect him for it.
Same here. Very, very much so. I think they're putting together an A-team.
Yeah.
We'll
see.
Public servants are supposed to be a representation of the people coming out of industry, going to serve and sacrifice in public office, not gain from it. And it's the way our government was set up to run. And career politicians were never meant to exist. And RFK, Elon Musk,
right.
President Trump himself, they're coming from industry. And so I really hope to see that. He'd be the perfect candidate for this.
Yes.
For this position.
Yes, he would.
Those who are new to farming or looking to get into farming, what's some practical steps that people could have, even just from a homestead or just personal farming? What's some practical things that people could be doing
to find land or get land, or if you have land, what do you do, or or no matter where you are?
No matter where you are, if you're living in a in a residential area and you want to do some own personal farming, or if you have an acre, 2 acres.
Yeah. So I actually wrote a book, Polyface Micro, and one of the chapters is how to have rabbits and chickens in a Manhattan apartment.
Okay.
On a footprint that's the same as a lazy boy recliner. Okay. So when you think of how much room in sometimes our houses a dog kennel takes up, or a terrarium or an aquarium, and I'm not against dogs, I'm not against terrariums, I'm not against aquariums, or good night, an entertainment center. All right. Now I guess we've all gone to flat screen TVs on the wall, so anyway, there are lots of things that you can do. So here is my here's my recipe for just the average person, that asks, what can I do? How can I participate? So the first thing is get in your kitchen. I mean, the first thing to do is quit buying ultra-processed and processed foods. A corollary is reduce your time at the supermarket, farmer's market, find alternatives, but get unprocessed food. I mean, I had brings up to mind a story. I had a mayor of a Canadian city up in Ontario come down for a visit. His wife was like chairman of the board of the local food bank. Well, there was a farmer that grew butternut squash. You don't eat vegetables, so maybe you don't like butternut squash. I happen to love butternut squash. I mean, butternut squash, boy, you know.
Actually, it's. I mean, you're the expert, but I'm told it's not a vegetable.
Oh, okay.
Squash and zucchini.
Oh, it's a gourd.
Or
Is
I
it
guess
a
squash
gourd?
and zucchini. Yeah. So on my non-vegetable diet, I could eat squash and zucchini.
Ah, okay. Squash and zucchini. All right. Well, that's good to know.
I love butternut squash.
You're teaching me now. It's good to know. Yeah. All right. So do you like butternut squash?
I do love. I love.
Yeah.
Butternut
Okay. I
squash.
love butternut squash. All right. So there was this farmer up there who was a commercial butternut squash grower. I mean, commercial. I mean, like, 2 tractor trailer loads a year. I mean, like, whatever, 50 acres of butternut squash. Well, he had a contract with the food company to grow this number of butternut squash. Well, they had a terrible season, and he almost lost his farm because if he couldn't make his contract, there was a penalty. He had to pay the buyer for reneging on the, on the volume. Well, he almost lost his farm over it. So next year, he says, man, that's never going to happen again. So he grows twice as much so, he can be sure to honor his contract. Well, of course, what happened? Bumper crop, wonderful weather, perfect, and he's got his bumper crop of butternut squash. The company doesn't want it all. So he's got acres of butternut squash out in the field, no market, no nothing. So this lady, the wife of the mayor of the town that's with the food bank, she gets her friends together. She says, hey, let's go, man, butternut squash, that's good food. Let's go out and we'll pick it and we'll take it to the food bank. So they went out, they got a whole truckload, not a tractor trailer, but a pickup truckload, loaded it all, butternut squash, took it down to the food bank, couldn't give away a single one. What do you do with a butternut squash? Nobody knew what to do with a butternut squash. And that's our ignorance about food in our modern culture. You get little cans of pureed butternut squash, right? You don't actually get a butternut squash, peel it or cut it in half, put some brown sugar and butter on it, stick it in the oven. Oh man, bring it on.
It's like candy.
It is. It's like candy. Exactly. So my first item is get off the bleachers and start playing the game of food. Use your kitchen. Get whole foods, real unprocessed foods, and slice them and dice them and cook them and puree them and do all the things that you can do with them. Get in your kitchen. Domestic culinary arts. Okay. Years and decades ago when we started, selling chicken, everybody knew how to cut up a chicken, right? I mean, 50 years ago, you couldn't go to a grocery store and get boneless, skinless breast.
It's cut it up.
You had to take a chicken and cut it up if you want a boneless, skinless breast. Well, we have watched this progression to where today, half of our customers don't even know a chicken has bones. They think, they think we go out to the, the boneless, skinless tree and pick it like pears or apples, off a tree. All right. So get in your kitchen, start working with food, become familiar with it, touch it, smell it, get in your kitchen. Number 2 is do something yourself. Touch the mystery and majesty of life. That can be something as simple as a quart jar of mung beans that you sprout on the windowsill. Okay. It can be as simple as a little 12-inch by 12-inch vermicomposting bin under your sink to put your kitchen scraps in and watch the worms, and you can take the castings and feed your, house plants. But do something to viscerally touch life. It's one of the reasons I'm such a fan of children's gardens. Kids today, they're growing up in this virtual world, and so you got this video game, and you're driving your car, and you run off the road, and you turn over, and you crack up against a tree, and in 1 second the game gives you another car, and you take off. That ain't life. When you're 16 and you wrap your car around a tree, life isn't going to give you
A new car.
Okay. And so the beauty of like children and gardening is, when that tomato wilts or dies because you didn't water it or a bug ate it or whatever, life doesn't give you another tomato. This is for all the marbles, and to actually watch things live and die and live and die. And there's a humility to that, a understanding that, wow, there's more going on here than is at the end of my fingertips.
Yeah.
And it makes you come to adulthood with a little less hubris than thinking, oh, I just manipulate this, I manipulate that, and we can just, change everything. And I would say one other thing on that children, we have a dearth, we have not a dearth, we have an explosion right now of mental illness problems among young people. Suicide's way up, all sorts of things, and people, they tie it to TikTok and social media and all this stuff. And I think it's tied completely to self-worth, to your self-image. If you look at every school shooting that's happened, every one of those guys, and they're all guys, felt ostracized. They felt unloved, unaffirmed. I'm weird. Nobody loves me. They had a terrible self-image. And I think that kids develop self-worth by successfully completing meaningful tasks. All four of those words: successfully completing meaningful tasks. When you and I were growing up, you had chores.
Yes.
You had to fill the wood box. You had to, weed the green beans. You helped mom in the kitchen with the food mill make canned tomatoes.
Yeah, you produce something.
Yeah. And so kids grew up doing things, successfully accomplishing meaningful tasks. And so you had an identity with, well, I know how to do this. Today, they're not growing up with that kind of self-identity and self-worth. I skinned that deer. I planted this garden and it grew. And so they don't know who they are because they've never done anything, really important. And it doesn't do any good for parents to say, oh, you're a good little boy, you're a good little girl. Well, what's the next question? Well, good for what?
Yeah.
Well, because you can, grow a garden, you can gather eggs, you can, water the pigs, you can fill the wood box, you can chop wood, you can, all these things.
I believe it's innate in us. And I always say we were created to be producers, not consumers. And if you only consume, then you feel like you have no value, no contribution. And it brings on a very high level of depression. We deal with it with the Veterans Suicide thing and Mighty Oaks Foundation.
Yes.
These guys served and they had like a mission, a purpose, value. They get out. They're sitting at home as a social dependent through the VA system. And once they lose that contribution, they just become consumers.
That's
you
right.
see their mental health just decline. And
who we are is directly linked to what we do. And if we don't do, we aren't.
Right.
Okay. So number one, get in your kitchen. Number two, do something to touch the majesty and mystery of life, whether if it's a home garden, something in your house, whatever. And the third thing then is to discover your provenance. Can you find a direct link to water, energy, food in your community, door-to-door delivery, whatever it is, but put attention on discovering or sleuthing, if you will. Think of it as you're a gold miner, and you're not mining for gold, you're mining for the foundations of life, energy, water, food. and you're trying to find the most, the mother lode is one you can trust, one that's stable, one that's secure, and one that you actually have a relationship with, that you actually know something about. And so that's kind of my recipe for what anybody can do. Get in your kitchen, touch something living, and put attention on your provenance, on your chain of stuff coming in. The biggest lie in the world is that you can change your trajectory, but you don't have to change anything you do.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. If you want a different trajectory, you got to change what you do. You got to read something different, go someplace different, do something different. You can't feed your mind, heart, and soul the same stuff and expect a different outcome.
It's the definition of idiocracy, right? Trying the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result.
That's right. That's right.
And for anything of significance or importance, there's always us in a them. And I think in this area of regenerative farming and being able to be independent of the food industry, as we're talking about, there's us and them. Who is the opposition, and what is the opposition to what you do, to an individual like Homestead?
I'm going to give you an answer that you're not expecting.
Okay.
And my answer to that is the biggest opposition is the person who thinks the government has my best interests at heart. That's the biggest opposition, because as you know, we've addressed it, the revolving door between industry and regulators.
Sure.
That's a revolving door. And so what you have is this collusion. That's a great word these days.
Yeah.
This collusion, it's actually fascism. Fascism is when the state controls business. And so business is dependent on the state, on the state's blessing, if you will, compliance with the state licensing. And so what's happened in food, just in food, 1906, Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. Within 6 months of The Jungle, which those who maybe don't know what The Jungle was, it articulated filth and human abuse within the slaughterhouse in it. That's Chicago, especially the Chicago slaughterhouse industry. And at that time, 7 companies controlled 50% of America's meat supply. 1906, okay? 7 companies controlled 50% of America's food supply. Within 6 months of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle coming out, those 7 companies lost half of their sales. Their sales dropped by half. They were on their heels. They were going bankrupt because people said, whoa, I don't trust that. And they went back to their neighborhood butcher, their neighborhood abattoir. Okay.
Right.
And it was the biggest kind of course correction, the way America was heading in its centralized meat supply. It was the greatest course correction that ever happened. Well, the big companies, these big 7, Swift, Armour, okay, they went to Teddy Roosevelt. I call him Teddy Rooseveltsky because he was really a communist. They went to Teddy Roosevelt and said, "Hey, we're going bankrupt. We need government protection. We need a way to get credibility back with the American consumer, for the American consumer to trust us again. So start an agency that will inspect food, in this case meat, and we'll put a USDA little blue stamp on it, and then the American people will buy from us again." What he should have done, if he'd have been a real American, he should have said, you built your bed, now go lie in it, you bunch of corrupt crooks.
Yeah.
Instead, he said, oh, why, of course, yes. And so he started the Food Safety Inspection Service, FSIS, under the USDA. And so 1908, FSIS comes in. This is 2 years. This is a 2-year process. All right, 1908, FSIS comes in. So here we are now, a little over a century after government involvement intervention, if you will, in the food space, especially meat and poultry. And today, 4 companies control 85% of America's meat supply. So we've gone from 7 of 50% to 4, 85%, and this is called the free market.
And they do so under the power of government regulation.
Yes, and so what's happened is over time, the regulations have gotten tighter and tighter and tighter and run the little neighborhood abattoirs, canneries out of business. And we have this massive centralization because what happened as all this developed, the industrial food system developed, and you had antibiotics. So now we could crowd animals together and overcome their fecal particulate with antibiotics. With cheap energy and mechanization, we could actually put way more animals in a single spot and bring food in and haul the manure out. You couldn't amass that many animals in one place before because you simply couldn't. It was simply too laborious, difficult, expensive to bring all the food stuff in and carry all the poop out. You had to kind of spread it out. Well, now we don't have to. We can put it in huge facilities. And so as that developed, the American, again, we're back to convenience. Then we got Spam, we got squeezable Velveeta cheese, TV dinners, through the 40s and 50s and 60s. And we started getting an opaque food system around these big facilities. Fences went up, guard towers, check-in, security guards. And what happens when people are shut out of an economic sector, when they're ignorant and they can't see into an economic sector? They become fearful. You fear what you don't know, right? The fear of the unknown. Well, what do you do when you fear the unknown? In this case, you ask for a bigger bully, the government, a bigger bully to look behind that fence. Check up for me. You're my vicarious eyes and ears to.
Now we're trusting the government.
Exactly. And so the bureaucracy grew, the regulations grew, the industry grew, the little neighborhood, the true neighbor to neighbor commerce, neighbor to neighbor
farm to market, right.
Farm to market. Yeah. Completely collapsed as this centralized industrial opaque system developed.
Let me ask you what to me would be an obvious answer. How much influence do these 4 companies have over the regulations?
Oh, complete. But the reason that they've been able to amass the power they have, So the government industrial union is seamless.
Sure,
that's fascism. Okay, and the result is that there is more ignorance, and now when people start discovering, red dye 29 and 300 million pounds of MSG and all the things that are going on, they ask for the government. I mean, this is the RFK conundrum, Right. Who makes the change? All right. And so my solution to this is not a Food Modernization Act like Obama did, or any more bureaucracy. My solution, and I've proposed this to some powerful people, is basically a food emancipation proclamation.
Can you explain that?
What?
Can you explain that?
Yeah, sure. A food emancipation proclamation. So right now, our food system is shackled. It's enslaved by a top-down regulatory climate that now, I can't sell you a glass of raw milk from my cow. Mm-hmm. I can't make bologna in my kitchen. And if you like it, you can't, I can't sell you a pound of my homemade bologna. I can't butcher a pig on my farm and sell you a pound of sausage from that pig. People walk into Walmart and Costco and see shelves full of pretty packaging, but that is an extremely narrow choice in our food system. That is a food that only comes through an industrial regulatory climate. There are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, certainly globally there are, of entrepreneurial farmers like me who are ready to get creatively better, innovative food to our neighbors, but we can't sell it because of these overburdensome regulations.
They were influenced by your competitors.
Yes. And so, meanwhile, we've got people begging for Federal Trade Commission, FTC, antitrust, litigation against these 4 terrible big companies. Well, how did those 4 terrible big companies come to exist? They came to exist because the bureaucratic collusion gave them regulations that are prejudicial to small-scale operations. All the food safety regulations are prejudicial against small scale. Well, if you're wanting to innovate in the marketplace, you have to birth a prototype. You have to birth an embryo. An embryo has to be small. So what people don't realize is that, Don Tyson and Frank Perdue and, Bob Evans of Bob Evans Restaurants, those are ones that I know about. All those great big outfits started from the tailgate of a pickup truck in the 1930s and 40s, which is now illegal. If we want tomorrow's creative, innovative solutions to our food debacle, we need to reimagine and revisit the ability of tailgate food commerce among neighbors. And so I've just coined a new word. I'm calling it neighbor food. We need to reinstitute neighbor food as an alternative to industrial opaque food, to where you and I, as voluntary, I'm using powerful language here, exercising our freedom of choice as voluntary consenting adults. Mm-hmm. If I have butter that you would like to come over to my house because you're my neighbor and buy, we should be able to engage in a food transaction without a bureaucratic agent being in the middle of that.
And I'll confess right here, in the milk, please come get me, but that's how I buy my butter. That's how I buy my milk.
Yeah. And, well, you know what's interesting? It's not illegal for you to buy it.
Right.
It's illegal for the farmer to sell it. Okay. And so there again,
I'm not a rat, so.
Yeah. There again, the hypocrisy of this is unbelievable, because in our country, and I don't want to get into a big discussion about pharmaceuticals and drugs, but you can't own fentanyl, you can't sell fentanyl, you can't buy fentanyl, okay, or cocaine or methamphetamine or whatever. All right. So we've this culture has identified these hazardous things and said you can't sell it, you can't buy it, you can't possess it. But on food, it's perfectly fine to buy it. You just can't sell it. If you can acquire it, you can acquire all the illegal food you want to. You can feed it to your kids. You can take it to a potluck at church. It's all free. It's all fine. I just can't sell it. So if it's really hazardous, why should it be okay to buy it or gift it?
Yeah, or possess it.
Or gift it or possess it and not sell it? What is it about a money transaction that suddenly turns it from patriotic, benign, good stuff to a hazardous substance? So these regulations are not about safety. They're about protecting the marketplace.
That's to say, it's always, in the situation like this, they always say, follow the money.
That's right.
And what gives these big companies the influence over the legislators to put in these regulations? Is there a back end? Is there corruption? Is there a back end? Is it from lobbying? Like how? I mean, the follow the money shows the incentive.
Yeah. So what it is again, I go back to what is the cause of all this? It's the consumer advocacy group that views the government as the solution to every problem. Mm. Oh, we've got rat turds in the peanut butter. We need a bigger budget, another agency, more regulations, more inspectors. So it's the American people who have this crazy idea that the only way I can get safe food is if a bureaucrat stamps it.
It's probably not safe anyway.
No. That is what's creating the fascist
That makes sense.
state.
That makes sense.
That's why we desperately need a food emancipation proclamation so that individual direct producer, I'm not saying give me the freedom to ship my chickens to Thailand,
Right.
or even to put them in Walmart. But if a neighbor walks over to my house and says, man, you're grinding homemade sausage, boy, I want a pound of that, we ought to be able to transact at that level without a bureaucrat
This
involved.
is letting capitalism play out. Because if I go buy
That's right.
something they got rat poop in it, and the next week I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to buy for someone else that's got
right.
a quality product.
That's right. That's right. And if I could give a shout out right now to our great hero, Congressman Thomas Massey of Kentucky, he has put in a constitutional amendment to guarantee the right of every American citizen to procure and produce the food of their choice from the source of their choice without infringement.
How can constituents across the country get behind that? Is it a bill that they could?
It's a constitutional amendment that he's put in. I don't know if there's a reference number on it. I don't know. But if you pull up Congressman Thomas Massey,
Okay.
Congressman from Kentucky, and look at what he's doing, you'll see it.
The way this works, guys, is like if you are not in that district, you can still contact your congressman and say, "Hey, we want to would love you to co-sponsor this bill."
Co-sponsor, yeah. That's the way those kind of things.
Yeah.
Those kind of things develop. In Virginia, we have a similar amendment that we're putting in Virginia, and we'll see where it goes this next legislative session. But somewhere along the line, the pushback from the industry is, well, we need a level playing field. If you're going to sell sausage, we need you to be on a level playing field with Jimmy Dean, right? I mean, that's the way they present it. But by presenting it that way, they're basically saying, yeah, we like football. Football's great. But the only place you can play football is in an NFL stadium. There's not going to be any more, Sunday afternoon pickup football games in the backyard with the lilac bush and the clothesline being the goalpost. No. We're all about playing football, but this is going to be a level playing field now. You can only play football in an NFL, in a licensed NFL stadium. If you did that, you would completely eliminate not only just, freedom, but the choice to be able to play a game somewhere else of my rules and of my choosing. Here's the deal. Part of this I call Uberizing the food system. 500 years ago, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker were embedded in the village. Everybody knew who the frauds were. They knew who the dirty guy, because they went to church together, they lived together, they went to the bar together, okay? They went hunting together. So you knew who you could trust, who you couldn't trust, all right? Because it was a community. They were embedded in the city, in the village. With the industrial food system, we've gradually moved away from that embedded butcher, baker, candlestick maker to this opaque industrial, security fence, opaque system, and nobody knows what's behind that fence. Well, just like Uber, what made Uber possible? What made Uber possible was real-time accountability. If I don't like the driver, you don't want this guy, he doesn't get any business. By the same token, if I'm a difficult passenger, don't pick this guy up, I don't get in. And so it was the internet that democratized real-time accountability.
Yeah.
That created, if 50 years ago somebody came up to you and says, you know what, you're going to go to Istanbul, jump in a car that looks like every other car with somebody that doesn't even have a chauffeur license and say, take me to, the Ritz-Carlton, I would have said, you're what? No, you get a taxi for that. You get a limo for that.
Yeah.
You get somebody that's been vetted. No. It's going to just be a person, and you're just going to trust this cyberspace accountability network.
The community vets itself.
Yeah, exactly. It vets itself. Airbnb, Same deal. Okay. All right. It's time to Uberize the food system. It's time. And the beauty is that the internet has allowed now the butcher, baker, and candlestick maker to re-embed in the village, not physically, but in the internet, in the social media. So the gossip and the monitoring and the autonomy and the relationships are created in cyberspace to allow the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker to be re-embedded in the American community via a global network. If that's not turning globalism on its head to localism and food security, safety, I don't know what is. And it's an exciting time.
For someone that has a flip phone, you sure get it. Never sent a text before, but you
Nope.
you get how this thing works. I agree with you. Consumers should be able to control. And this is capitalism. You either produce and do a good. This is why I fly a lot. I have a pet peeve with the airline industry because they don't have to have good customer service because they're government subsidized and the government bills them out every time. If the government would stop paying their bills, you get a lot better customer service in the airline industry. But when the government steps into stuff, it tends to ruin it.
That's a big difference between us and Europe too. You go to Europe, my goodness, they do everything possible to have as many different airlines at an airport as possible. In the U.S., we do everything possible to make sure a little competitor can't get a slot and can't get in there. And airfares are a third in Europe what they are in the U.S. It's unbelievable. Yeah, you get me on another rabbit trail there. But yeah, you're right. You're exactly right.
You are a leader in this. It's very clear why. And I think of men like you and people like you in industries, and you're leaving behind a legacy. What is it? What legacy do you hope to leave behind for the next generation of farmers?
Well, the legacy I hope to leave behind is a love for earthworms, just a love for God's creation, and the stewardship that entails and enjoins, so that nature is not a reluctant partner to be coerced and get you in a half Nelson. I'm going to make you produce this and but rather that God's given us a benevolent lover to be caressed in the right places at the right time. This is not a place of scarcity. It's a place of unbelievable abundance. Yeah. And I think God wants us to appreciate that and tease it out with humility and strategic stewardship rather than an antagonistic approach.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I've heard so much about the population, the scarcity of the food supply, but I don't buy it. This earth is meant to be able to sustain life and reproduce, and we just have to be able to treat it correctly.
That's right.
Good stewards of it, as you said. Well, man, I love that so much. I could spend probably hours digging in more because I'm an infant in this topic. So I appreciate you. And we have some amazing sponsors that appreciate you as well being on the show. Smith & Wesson Firearms, Vortex Optics, Gators Eyewear, BioPro Supplements. I'm having a feeling you're probably not a supplement person, but
not much.
But BioPro is I think you can appreciate this. It's all natural, and it comes off the velvet of deer antlers. So it's kind of Eastern medicine, but just more natural. Take the velvet of deer antlers.
Those Easterners had a lot of stuff. Yeah. Acupuncture and all that. It's real, boy. It's real. It's good stuff.
We're gonna give you some to try.
Good.
And then we've got holy water. You get a sip of holy water there. And also a company called Bio Accelerator out of Scottsdale. They do stem cell therapy in Colombia.
Okay.
Amazing supporter of ours of the show, and Allied Wealth Management. So all those people made it possible for you to be here and be able to share this episode. And we got some gifts for you. One of the most significant gifts that we want to give you, and you asked specifically for this, is the Smith & Wesson 1854. Wow. And
are you for real?
Yes. So this one's mine, and we're getting yours shipped to you. But and we have a Vortex Spark optic on it, so I have one there. Actually, that's your optic there, and we're gonna go out and shoot this thing. But this one's a 44 Magnum. It has 9. You can put 9 44 Magnum rounds in here plus 1, And it comes in 357, 44, and 45. This one against 44. I'm about to go for Smith & Wesson, go hunt and shoot this thing, shoot some deer.
That is pretty cool. Wow.
So there you go.
Wow. Yes. All right. Look at that.
Hey, you look like you need a lever action on your farm.
Yeah. Oh, lever action is the ultimate. Yeah. How about that? That's beautiful. Beautiful. Wow. My when I'm gone from the house, my wife, when I'm there, it's all okay, but when I'm gone, she sleeps with a Smith & Wesson pistol, under my pillow.
Yeah.
And when I call home and say, everything okay, if it's late, and she's already in bed, she says, yeah, I'm just here with Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson. We're just having a good time.
Well, I mean, I love Smith & Wesson. It's America. To me, it's like America's most patriotic gun company.
Yeah.
Been around for 170 years, and coming on, being partner with them and getting to know the staff there, Mr. Smith and Kyle Tengall and the whole team there. They're just amazing people. Same with Vortex. The guy Shamus Terry who runs Vortex. These are just amazing human beings. Also, we have some Gators glasses for you, which are really good for shooting. Good ballistic eyewear. So
good.
And last thing we have for you is a swag bag from Mighty Oaks Foundation. I know you're a patriot, and Mighty Oaks Foundation is a foundation. I found it in 2011, and we serve America's military and first responders through Mighty Oaks. We got a bunch of books in there, T-shirts, caps, a bunch of swag for you to carry back with you.
Cool. It makes it worth coming.
Yeah, absolutely. We always say
I've never gotten this kind of
we have the best
stuff from
gifts
somebody.
on the show, and every episode is like Christmas morning. So, but
I guess
we
it
appreciate
is.
you.
This is great. Thank you. Yeah. That's wonderful.
So, guys, I hope you liked this episode. If you did, like, comment, share, subscribe. Click the subscribe button, whatever platform you're on. And we got some more exciting episodes coming up. So tune in next week and stay resilient. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled and you don't want to miss it.